Hi, warriors. This is Jaylyn, my legal warrior, and today's segment is going to be about family court services mediation in the context of a domestic violence situation. Now, as you know, that the courthouses are still closed until April 3rd, so they should be open starting April 6th until further notice is really how I would interpret that, just given that day by day with this coronavirus, it's not exactly that the cases are becoming less, it's becoming more, and more restrictions are taking place. But hopefully the court has some sort of recourse for us so that we can operate. But if you are facing a domestic violence situation, make sure that you file for a restraining order, ask for an emergency protective order, and potentially make sure that if your children are faced with or are part of the restraining order or part of the abuse, that you contact the police officers. You do make sure that they are seen by a medical professional and perhaps enrolling them or yourselves in therapy. So the courthouses are open for the emergency restraining orders. So the temporary domestic violence restraining orders, you can absolutely file that. You don't have to wait until April 6th. You should do that as soon as possible. The closer that you are filing the restraining order to the date that the last abuse happened is better for you and better for your family. And also it helps the court understand that this is in fact an emergency. Like, I could not wait, not, oh, I waited a month and now I'm deciding to file because now I got around to it. It kind of tarnishes your credibility there as to whether that incident actually happened or not, and especially if it's a he said, she said sort of situation. So if you have a family court services mediation date that is coming up, or you're requesting one as part of your restraining order request, since you don't have any custody or visitation orders, then you can in fact, ask for one through your temporary restraining order request. And so I wanted to show you guys what those forms looked like and what you would need to fill out in preparation of the family court services mediation. So family court services mediation obviously happens only when the courthouse is open, so you wouldn't be going in the next week, at least as of this recording. It's March 29, 2020. But you would need to list out the information of the dad, information of the mother, and you would also make sure that you check off this box for yes for the alleging domestic violence. This is very important because sometimes individuals that haven't even filed for a restraining order and think, oh, I've never told anybody about it, I've never filed for anything, and I have been facing domestic violence within our household, but I don't want to tell anybody. But I also don't want the other parent to have time with their kids because I'm afraid they might abuse them or they have abused them. Well, this is the time for you to tell the court and tell the mediator that there is domestic violence, even if you've never reported it. And this is something that is understandable by our legal system, is that victims of domestic violence don't necessarily report the domestic violence. And we understand that it is a traumatic experience. It's not something that's easy to talk about, and it does require some level of vulnerability and being able to kind of put the interests of your family, your kids over that fear of perhaps judgment or whatever that fear that you might have that's preventing you from reporting domestic violence. You don't want to do that in the context of a child custody visitation. You need to get over that fear and really focus on your kids and what is in the best interest of your kids in terms of your custody and visitation. Because if you don't report it at that time, and then you receive a recommendation from the court that the other parent now should have 50-50, but you know that they have been abusing them in some fashion, but you never reported it, you can't undo that. It's going to be very difficult for you to undo that, even if you do have evidence of the abuse at that point in time. I think your credibility might be at stake there. So make sure you check that off, because it's very important that you report the domestic violence. Even if this is your first time reporting it, it's okay. You're not going to be judged in any way. This is one of the most crucial aspects of your case, especially when you have kids, to report the domestic violence, to say that there was domestic violence in my household. And whether you have a restraining order or not, that's something that you would also need to inform the court. So when you go to Family Court Services mediation, they are going to require you to fill out this confidential form. And it's confidential because it doesn't go in your file. It stays with Family Court Services mediation, and it guides them as to what each parent has to fill this out, what each parent thinks about what the current custody orders are, what their concerns are, what they're requesting in terms of custody and visitation. But in terms of this video, we're going to just focus on this part, because it's saying that if you are protected by a restraining order, or if you even alleged a domestic violence restraining order, you can request to not sit with your abuser during one of the most important parts of your child custody and visitation case. So utilize that if you do feel intimidated by the other person. I know that there's victims of domestic violence that when they do see their abuser in front of them, they do feel like they shut down. They can't say everything that they want to say. So if you are one of those individuals, it's perfectly okay. Do not shy away from not being in the same room of the other party, which is your abuser. So there's pros and cons to this. So the pro is your safety. You are able to speak and actually convey everything that has happened in terms of the domestic violence to the mediator. The downside is that you don't know what the other party is saying. So weighing those two options is something, it's a personal choice, and just depending on the severity of the domestic violence, you may want to sit with your abuser so you know exactly what they're saying, what they're reporting to the mediator, and you're not necessarily blindsided, and you're able to actually, respond. But if you don't feel comfortable doing that, then please, 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 please request to be seen separately from your abuser, so that you are able to get all of the information that is necessary in order for this mediator to assist you guys in reaching either an agreement or a recommendation for the court for custody and visitation. So it's very crucial. We have to just emphasize that stating all of the information that you need to provide to the mediator, so that there isn't any details that's left out, and you're not like in court saying, oh wait, I forgot to tell this to the mediator, and this is very important. It's a one-time chance to be able to report it to the mediator, and it may or may not have swung their recommendation one way or the other. But you can, of course, report it at the time of your hearing, but it's suspect. Like, why wouldn't you say it at the time of mediation? It's like, oh, if it's that important, you would mention it there. So being prepared for family court services mediation is very important, especially when there is domestic violence and you have not been very open about the abuse that's been going on in your household. So you can, in fact, have a support person. So let's say you are somebody who, yes, you feel intimidated by the other party and you just don't want to necessarily see them, and you feel that you won't be able to say everything that you want to say if they are in the other room. Well, as you can read right here, the court allows you to have a support person, and it states here that if only you've been protected by a restraining order, you can ask the court to allow you to bring in your support person even if you're alleging domestic violence. I would make that request because it's very important for you to feel comfortable. So if a support person is there and you do have a restraining order, then make sure that that support person is there, and they are asking that support person to fill out this form, and they'll hand that to them to allow them to keep you in the room during the mediation. And then the last thing that's important is whether you're requesting your address and telephone number remain confidential. And you could get that really simply from the state. You are able to get a confidential, address and phone number to protect your privacy. But you do need some sort of mailing address in order to provide to the court and to the other parties so that they are able to communicate with you, at least through mail. Well, if you found this video to be helpful, please share with friends, family, colleagues, anybody that could use this in preparation for their family court services mediation date that hopefully is coming up, especially if they have been abused by the other parent or their children have been abused by the other parent. And this is the time to report it to the mediator and not hold back and not think that you're going to be judged or you're going to be intimidated by the other person. And you have to report it. You can, be in separate rooms. So please share this with all those that may or may not find this useful or resourceful. Any one of us can be in one of these situations down the line, and it would be good to have this information so that we can feel empowered to make better decisions in the future to benefit us and our family. Thank you, warriors. Please do what is best for you and your family, especially during this coronavirus epidemic.